Hello, my name is Todd Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to this latest episode of the Leaving Babylon series. As we've seen so far, leaving Babylon is a process of separating ourselves from the systems of this world and integrating ourselves into the kingdom of Elohim. And this often involves a complete paradigm shift. It affects all areas of our lives, from the way that we think, the way that we act, the way that we talk, and the way that we walk. And of course, this is the transformation process that prepares us to become fruitful and productive members in the kingdom of Elohim. And as we discussed in the last episode, that kingdom is populated by a covenant family, the covenant family of Yisrael. And I hope that it's clear that if you've joined the covenant renewed by the Messiah, then you are in Yisrael. You are in this covenant assembly. You're not part of some new religion founded by the Roman Empire, and you're not part of some entity called the Christian Church. It should also be clear that you don't have to be Jewish or be in the religion of Rabbinic Judaism to be in Yisrael. In fact, since the covenant was broken by both the house of Yisrael and the house of Judah, the only way to be in the renewed covenant with Yahweh is through the covenant renewed by his son, Yeshua. So the point is not to be classified as being Jewish, and just being Jewish does not mean that you're automatically in the covenant. In fact, many who claim to be Jewish may not even be from the tribe of Judah at all. So the goal is to become part of Yisrael, whether you can discover that you have Jewish ancestry or not. It doesn't matter. And we also talked about the modern state of Israel, established as a Jewish state, and this Jewish state lays claim to all the land of ancient Yisrael. Their claim even includes the land that belongs to the house of Yisrael, which they will not allow those from Joseph or those from the house of Israel to move back into. So they claim the land according to the covenant promise given to Abram and Abraham, but they're attempting to exclude all of Yisrael. And they also claim the land according to the covenant, but they're not in the covenant renewed by the Messiah. So this is an interesting quandary that we see right now with the modern state of Israel. But while I grew up as a Christian and believed that I was in the new covenant instituted by Jesus, I was never taught that it was actually a renewed covenant, and that renewed covenant also involves land. Instead, I was taught that I was going to heaven because I was saved, and I think that's what's universally taught and understood in Christianity. And as a result, Christians are really not too interested in the covenant land. They may like to visit it, but they don't necessarily feel vested in this land because they fail to understand that it is actually part of the covenant renewed by the Messiah. And as a result, we see Christianity essentially relegating the covenant land to those who claim to be the Jews, and they support the position of the Jewish state, which lays claim to all of the covenant land. And by doing so, they're actually giving up their inheritance in the renewed covenants. Sadly, this flawed understanding of the scriptures and the covenant has permeated into Messianic Judaism and even into the Hebrew roots movement. And instead of going to the covenant land in Jerusalem to observe the appointed times, the feast of Yahweh, many gather in various places around the world because they don't see the eternal significance of the covenant land. And many people carry this over from their background in Christianity. So that's why we're including this topic in the Leaving Babylon series, because this is another area of the covenant that we really need to understand. And in the last episode, we talked about how the covenant with Israel involves a family. And we looked at Abram and how his name means father, son, and it's surrounded by mother. So we have actually a family contained in the name of Abram. And the covenant with Abram actually started with a promise. He was promised descendants and he was promised land. And we read about that promise in Genesis 12:1. It says, Now Yahweh had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So it's interesting, this man whose name actually encompasses family, he's told to leave his family, go to a new land, and through that action, all families of the earth shall be blessed. So we see this real strong emphasis on families involving Abram. And so this promise required Abram to leave Babylon and travel to the land of Canaan, to the promised land. And only when he actually crossed over or passed through the waters and entered into that land did he actually then enter into a covenant with Yahweh. And this is an important pattern to understand. And we read about that covenant in Genesis 5, beginning at 9. It says, So he said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all those to him and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And of course, this is the blood covenant that we talked about in previous episodes. And by not cutting the birds but cutting the animals, we see actually 8 pieces that were put, 4 on one side, 4 on the other, with blood running down the middle. And when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Now, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. That's Tardamag, and that's the same deep sleep that occurred to Adam when his family was being established by Yah taking Hava out of his side. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass, when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So we talked about this in a previous episode, how it was really Yeshua that passed through the blood, and this symbolized that only he would take on the penalty of death for this covenant being violated. And it was through his shed blood that we see atonement for the breaking of this covenant. Later, we see a covenant made with Abraham, and this is known as the covenant of circumcision, when his name was actually changed to Abraham, and Sarai's name was changed to Sarah. And again, we see a promise of descendants and of land, and we read about the actual covenant in Genesis 17, 2 through 8. It says, And I will make a covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. And I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and your descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. So notice now, this covenant involves the land of Canaan versus the other covenant, which involved a much larger swath of land from the river Nile to the Euphrates. Now here's the process of this covenant of circumcision as we continue in Genesis 17:9. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout your generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations. He who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with money must be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So notice, you don't have to be a natural descendant of Abraham. And remember, Abraham was not a Jew, he was a Hebrew. So this covenant of circumcision is made with Hebrews, and you don't have to be a native born in order to become part of this covenant. You just have to be circumcised and bear that sign. Now, Abraham and all his descendants of this covenant would actually shed their blood. And notice the different dimensions of the land as I described. Here, this covenant of circumcision, this family covenant, is getting smaller. The land is getting more concentrated and more focused. Abram's descendants were promised land from the Nile to the Euphrates, and those in the covenant of circumcision, this family, of course, the whole point of it being a sign on the male organ was because this is where his seed emits from, and we talked about last time how Sarah was just as important as Abraham was to this covenant of circumcision, because he would pass the seed through the cutting into Sarah. So this is, again, the family coming together through the covenant of circumcision. And now this covenant of circumcision involves the land of Canaan, not Egypt or Assyria or extending to the Euphrates and the Nile. Now, this was where the family would then develop into Yisrael. And we talked about the first naming of Yisrael at Peniel, when Yisrael was about to return to the covenant land with his new family that had actually been born outside the land, everybody but Benjamin. And at that naming event, we read Yisrael, and then Am Elohim and Am Anashim. And so this whole focus on not only the mother, but which is Israel, attached to Yisrael, but then a people, Am, for Elohim, and a people, Am, from men. Well, that covenant assembly needs a home, and that's why during the second naming of Yisrael, we see it occurring at Bet-El, the house of Elohim. And at Bet-El, Yisrael was commanded now to be fruitful and multiply, and this was the same commandment that was given to Adam in the garden. So Israel had the same mandate as Adam, take dominion and begin with the covenant land. His descendants were provided with the choice of blessings or curses after they had entered the promised land under Joshua, whose name is Yeshua, the same name as the Messiah. And of course, this is no coincidence that Joshua was the one who would lead Israel into the promised land. And we can't forget that connection. The Messiah shares that same name, and he too will bring his people into the promised land. Now remember, when Israel left Egypt, Joshua's name was Hoshea, which simply means salvation. Then, before he entered the land with the 12 spies, his name was changed to Yahushua, which means Yah saves his people. And he then led this nation of Israel as they crossed over the Jordan River as part of this Hebrew covenant. And after Joshua brought Israel across the Jordan, what happened? They were circumcised at Gilgal, and then they observed the Passover. He later renewed the covenant with all of Israel at Shechem. And of course, this was the pattern for Yeshua, the Messiah, who was immersed at the same place that Israel crossed the Jordan. And then he came to renew the covenant and actually circumcise our hearts. Now, Moses described the process that would occur when they renewed the covenant after entering the land. They were clearly told the blessings for obedience and the curses for disobedience as described in Deuteronomy 28. And the point was to obey and stay in the land. The curses were made so severe that no one, that no one on earth would want those curses. So they were made so severe. So hopefully the people would just want the blessings and focus on the blessings and obedience. But just like Adam and Hava, they failed. Yisrael failed, and as a result, they were divided and they were punished. They failed to stay on the straight covenant path, and Jeremiah actually described what happened in Jeremiah 18:15 through 17. It says, "Because my people have forgotten me, they have burned incense to worthless idols, and they have caused themselves to stumble in their ways from the ancient paths, to walk in pathways and not on a highway, to make their land desolate and a perpetual hissing. Everyone who passes by it will be astonished and shake his head. I will scatter them as an east wind before the enemy. I will show them the back and not the face in the day of their calamity." Remember, they were supposed to be a kingdom of priests. They were supposed to shine as a light to the nations through their obedience and the blessings that they would receive. But either way, they were going to be an example to the nations of the power and might of Elohim. So if they did not choose the blessings and they chose the curses, then they would still be an example. And it says, everyone who passes by will be astonished and shake his head. In other words, they'll look upon what happened to these people. And of course, the point would be they didn't obey Elohim. They did not keep the terms of the covenant. And so they revealed the truth of Yahweh either way. Now, here Jeremiah describes the curse of disobedience, again, because they forgot Elohim. They forgot him and his instructions. And both the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah strayed from those ancient paths. The house of Israel was removed first by the Assyrians. They were completely removed and scattered to the four corners of the earth. They completely lost their identity as described by the prophet Hosea in Hosea 1. They were mixed and they were multiplied, though, just like what happened in Egypt, except this time they were mixed with the nations. And Joseph has been multiplying through all this time of punishment. Isaiah prophesied that there would be a regathering by a rod, the root of Jesse. And we read about this in Isaiah 11. It says, "There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahweh. His delight is in the fear of Yahweh, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his loins, and faithfulness the belt of his waist. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaning child shall put his hand in the viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall stand as a banner to the people. For the nations shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. It shall come to pass in that day that the master shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left, from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath and the islands of the sea. He will set up a banner for the nations, and will assemble the outcasts of Yisrael, and gather together the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. Also the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. But they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines towards the west. Together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall lay their hand on Edom and Moab, and the people of Ammon shall obey them. Yahweh will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt. With his mighty wind he shall shake his fist over the river, and strike it in the seven streams, and make men cross over dry shod. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people. who will be left from Assyria, as it was for Israel in a day that he came up from the land of Egypt. So we see Jeremiah mentions this great regathering, a future regathering of both Israel and Judah, and he compares it to a day when Israel was brought out of Egypt. And Jeremiah prophesied that both houses would be restored, and they would be restored through the renewed covenant, which we've talked about in many of the previous episodes, but it's worthwhile reading it in its full context again. Jeremiah 31, beginning at 7. For thus says Yahweh, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations, proclaim, give praise, and say, O Yahweh, save your people, the remnant of Yisrael. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth, among them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and the one who labors with child. Together a great throng shall return there. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of water in a straight way in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Yahuwah, O nations, and declare it in the isles far off, and say, He who scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. For Yahuwah has redeemed Jacob, and ransomed him from the hand of one stronger than he. Therefore they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, streaming to the goodness of Yahuwah, for wheat and new wine and oil. For the young of the flock and of the herd, their souls shall be like a well-watered garden, and they shall sorrow no more at all. Then shall the virgin rejoice in a dance, and the young men and old together. For I will turn their mourning to joy, will comfort them, and make them rejoice rather than sorrow. I will satiate the soul of the priest with abundance, and my people will be satisfied with goodness, says Yahweh. So how will this happen, this great return, this great restoration? Well, it happens through repentance. And we read about this further in Jeremiah 31:16. It says, Thus says Yahuwah, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work shall be rewarded, says Yahuwah, and they shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is hope in your future, says Yahuwah, that your children shall come back to their own border. I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. You have chastened me, and I was chastened like an untrained bull. Restore me, and I will return. Remember, return is the same as repentance. For you are Yahuwah my Elohim. Surely after my turning, I repented, and after I was instructed, I struck myself on the thigh. I was ashamed, yes, even humiliated, because I bore the reproach of my youth. Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a pleasant child? For though I spoke against him, I earnestly remember him still. Therefore my heart yearns for him. I will surely have mercy on him, says Yahweh. Set up signposts, make landmarks, set your heart toward the highway, the way in which you went. Turn back, O Virgin of Yisrael, turn back to your cities. How long will you gad about, O you backsliding daughter? For Yahuwah has created a new thing in the earth. A woman shall encompass a man. So again, we saw that with encompassing Abram. And through this covenant, Yah would bring his people back, his family back, and restore them. And so what is the renewed covenant? We read further on in Jeremiah 31:27. It says, Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with seed of man and the seed of the beast. And it shall come to pass that as I have watched over them to pluck up and break down, to throw down, to destroy, and to afflict, so I will watch over them to build and to plant, says Yahweh. And remember last time we talked about how Yisrael is considered the planting of El. Continuing in 29, in those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. But everyone shall die for his own iniquity. Every man who eats the sour grapes, his teeth shall be set on edge. Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I will make a renewed covenant with the house of Yisrael and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says Yahuwah. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahuwah. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it on their hearts. And I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says Yahweh. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin will I remember no more. So this restoration and return is all about knowing Yahweh and having His Torah within us so that we can obey. And our relationship is restored. We know Him through the renewed covenant. And through this renewed covenant, the people will be united under one king after they are regathered. And we read about that in Ezekiel 37, beginning at 21. Then say to them, Thus says Yahuwah Elohim, Surely I will take the children of Yisrael from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Yisrael, and one king shall be king over them all. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. They shall not defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. David my servant shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. Then they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell there, they, their children, and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. The nations also will know that I, Yahuwah, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. Now notice this covenant of peace. It's Brit Shalom in Hebrew, and it's also an everlasting covenant, Brit Olam, covenant through the age. And this is the same as the renewed covenant described by Jeremiah. The covenant of peace is what Elohim brings when His wrath is abated. And we read about a covenant of peace in Numbers 25, beginning at 10. Then Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aharon, the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was zealous with my zeal among them, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my zeal. Therefore say, Behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for Elohim and made atonement for the children of Yisrael. So this is a pattern of the covenant of peace that Messiah will bring forth under the everlasting Melchizedek priesthood. We also read about a covenant of peace in Isaiah 54:10. It says, For the mountains shall depart, and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from you, nor shall my covenant of peace be removed, says Yahuwah, who has mercy on you. And we also read about it in Ezekiel 34:25 and Ezekiel 37:26. And again, all of this renewal involves a regathering of the people of Elohim to the land. And we read further about that regathering in Isaiah 5:26. It says, He will lift up a banner to the nations from afar, and will whistle to them from the end of the earth. Surely they shall come with speed swiftly. In Zechariah 10:8, I will whistle for them and gather them, for I will redeem them, and they shall increase as they once increased. Isaiah 11:12, again, He shall set up a banner for the nations, and will assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 56:8, Yahweh Elohim, who gathers the outcasts of Israel, says, Yet I will gather to him others besides those who are gathered to him. So these are just a sampling of the texts which talk about this. And all of prophecy and the entire covenant points to this future regathering, this great regathering. This future gathering will be so great that they'll no longer be talking about the exodus from Egypt. In this case, their gathering will be from, instead of one nation, it'll be from the entire planet. And it's going to be in such a miraculous fashion that it's going to make the exodus from Egypt and the parting of the Red Sea and all the miracles that took place, it's going to make those pale in comparison. And Jeremiah actually talks about that. In Jeremiah 16, beginning at 11, we read, "Because your fathers have forsaken me, says Yahuwah, they have walked after other gods and have served them and worshipped them and have forsaken me and not kept my Torah. And you have done worse than your fathers, for behold, each one follows the dictates of his own evil heart, so that no one listens to me. Therefore I will cast you out of this land into a land that you did not know, neither you nor your fathers. And there you will serve other gods day and night, where I will not show you favor. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says Yahuwah, that it shall no more be said, Yahuwah lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, but Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands where he had driven them. For I will bring them back into their land, which I gave to their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishermen, says Yahuwah, and they shall fish them, and afterward I will send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them, from every mountain and every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways. They are not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity hidden from my eyes. And first I will repay double for their iniquity and their sin, because they have defiled my land, and they have filled my inheritance with carcasses of their detestable and abominable idols. O Yahuwah, my strength, my fortress, my refuge in the day of affliction, the nations shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, worthless and unprofitable things. Will a man make gods for himself which are not gods? Therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know. I will cause them to know my hand and my might, and they shall know that my name is Yahweh. Now this text reveals that the people were exiled because they forsook Yahweh and his Torah. And the return of the nations will involve awakening amongst the Gentiles, amongst the nations. And they'll learn the name of Yahweh, which has been hidden for so long, and they'll return to him and his ways. And notice the promise of fishermen first, and that's why Yeshua called his disciples to be fishers of men. He was fulfilling this prophecy of Jeremiah, and he says afterward that he will send out hunters. And this is what Yeshua described when he returns the second time in Matthew 24:30-31. He says, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now again, this will make the deliverance from Egypt pale in comparison, and Jeremiah further describes this event occurring through the Messiah in Jeremiah 23, beginning at 1. He says, woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, says Yahweh. Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel against the shepherds who feed my people. You have scattered my flock, driven them away, and not attended to them. Behold, I will attend to you for the evil of your doing, says Yahuwah. But I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. I will set up shepherds over them who will feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, nor shall they be lacking, says Yahweh. Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, that I will raise to David a branch of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper, and execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Yisrael will dwell safely. Now this is his name by which he will be called, Yahuwah our righteousness. And we read in Jeremiah, therefore, behold, the days are coming, says Yahuwah, that they shall no longer say, as Yahuwah lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, but as Yahuwah lives, who brought up and led the descendants of the house of Israel from the north country and from all the countries where I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. So again, this great regathering involves gathering the outcasts of Israel from the four corners of the earth and bringing them back to the promised land, the covenant land, and that will make Egypt, the deliverance from Egypt, pale in comparison, where people won't even talk about that anymore. Now this repeated mention of the deliverance from Egypt seems to be telling us that the future deliverance and regathering, sometimes referred to as the Greater Exodus, might also occur at Passover. And that's why it's important that we understand and rehearse all of the appointed times. And Well, some people teach that the spring feasts are all fulfilled and only the fall feasts remain to be fulfilled. That's not correct. While they had a past fulfillment, they also have future fulfillments, and we read about that in the book of Revelation. So there will be a great regathering and return to the land, heralded by the Messiah, and this will be the actual final fulfillment of the appointed times. And we read again about all these continual and final fulfillments through the book of Revelation. Now remember, in the last episode we talked about Isaiah 66, 7 through 8, and how many look to this as a prophecy about the modern state of Israel. And if you examine the text in its entirety, it's talking about the birth of Zion as Yahweh destroys his enemies, and it's all about him being glorified. Now it's important to understand that Zion is not a group of people looking to found a Jewish state. He specifically says in verse 2, he will look upon him who is poor and of contrite spirit and who trembles at my word. Now, we don't see many people trembling at the word of Yahweh today in the modern state of Israel. In fact, the majority of the people don't even consider his word. Instead of humility and contrite spirit, you see t-shirts and slogans exalting the power and the might of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Also, it's important to remember that through the partition of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, many nations were born or created spontaneously, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and the modern Arab world. We also saw the French mandates of Syria and Lebanon that resulted in the formation of those countries, as well as the British mandates of Mesopotamia and Palestine that ultimately resulted in the formation of the modern state of Israel. So the formation of a Jewish state was an incredible event, but it was not the only nation birthed after World Wars I and II through various negotiations and treaties from the division of the Ottoman Empire. Of course, using the word Zionism to label the movement that led to the development of the Jewish state further confuses the issue because, as we said, Zion is not the same as Zionism. Zion specifically defined the city of David in the scriptures, and we read about that in 2 Samuel 5:7. It says, nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And that's confirmed by 1 Kings 8:1, 1 Chronicles 11:5, and 2 Chronicles 5:2. So, and it's important also to remember that Zion is not the same as Jerusalem. Zion is where the king lives and reigns with his family. Again, we're talking about the city of David, and now Jerusalem has expanded from the city of David, but they're two different things. And this distinction is made clear in Zechariah 8:3. It says, thus says Yahuwah, I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of Yahuwah of hosts, the holy mountain. So we see that Zion is in the midst of Jerusalem. It's in the center of Jerusalem. And in Zechariah 9:9, we also see that distinction between Zion and Jerusalem. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming. He is just and having salvation, lowly, and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So Zion is within Jerusalem, and it's the closest to the king. And only recently has focus and attention been placed on the city of David, which was largely ignored and forgotten for centuries. In fact, if you go to Jerusalem today, they still don't even recognize the city of David as Zion. They actually call the western hill as Mount Zion, Mount Zion. So the point of all this is that Isaiah 66 refers to the birthing of Zion and the wrath of the king, which has not yet occurred. Zionism, the movement of Zionism, sought the covenant land without the covenant. The final restoration will involve those in the covenant. So the text in Isaiah 66 actually ends by describing the king and all the nations going to Jerusalem to worship Yahweh. And we read starting in 18, for I know their works and their thoughts. It shall be that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come to see my glory. I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my fame nor seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory among the nations. Then they shall bring all your brethren for an offering to Yahuwah out of all the nations on horses, and in chariots, and in litters, on mules, and on camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. Thus says Yahuwah, as the children of Yisrael bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of Yahuwah, and I will also take some of them for priests and Levites, says Yahuwah. For as the renewed heavens and the renewed earth which I will make shall remain before them, says Yahuwah, so shall your descendants and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one renewed moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says Yahuwah. So this text is talking about a time in the future, not 1948. And it shows the continuing importance of the land and where the king will set up his throne. Anyone who worships the king should surely desire to see the king and live near the king in the land. So there will be a return to the land, and people in covenant should be prepared to return to the land. And Isaiah described this great reconnection in Isaiah 62. It says, for Zion's sake I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a lamp that burns. The nations shall see my righteousness, and all kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of Yahuwah will name. You shall also be a crown of glory in the hand of Yahuwah, and a royal diadem in the hand of your Elohim. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land any more be desolate, but you shall be called Hephzibah, and your land Beulah. For Yahuwah delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a virgin, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your Elohim rejoice over you. I have set watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem. They shall never hold their peace day or night. You who make mention of Yahuwah, do not keep silent, and give him no rest till he establishes, until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. Yahuwah has sworn by his right hand and by the arm of his strength. Surely I will no longer give your grain as food to your enemies, and the sons of the foreigner shall not drink your new wine, for which you have labored. But those who have gathered it shall eat it, and praise Yahuwah. Those who have brought it together shall drink it in my holy courts. Go through the gates, prepare the way for the people. Build up the highway, take out the stones, lift up a banner for the peoples. Indeed, Yahuwah has proclaimed to the end of the earth, say to the daughter of Zion, surely your salvation is coming. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. And they shall call them the holy people, the set-apart people, the redeemed of Yahuwah, and you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken. This future event is actually described in the book of Revelation when the renewed Jerusalem descends upon the planet, as described by John in Revelation 21, 2-3. It says, then I, John, saw the set-apart city, renewed Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. Elohim himself will be with them and be their Elohim. And of course, this all occurs through the renewed covenant, and it's actually a fulfillment of the land covenant. So Yeshua, coming in the clouds, will gather the elect from the four corners of the earth. Not a rapture to live in heaven, but rather he gathers them together and prepares them to live on earth, to possess the land and restore and rule over the planet, to fulfill the mandate of Adam and Hava through Yeshua and his bride. And it's important to understand that not everyone in the kingdom is the bride. And that's an important distinction that we'll talk about in the next episode as we discuss living in the kingdom. Until then, my name is Todd Bennett. Shalom.